Hello everybody, it's Wyron here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are on the map Eschen, and we are doing a bit of an Angrund against the Lizardmen matchup. So, Angrund obviously has Ghost Ancestors, and that is really the only reason I decided to run them instead of Dwarves. I really wanted to give a shot to Ghost Ancestors against the Lizardmen, because of course Lizardmen don't really have a counter to ethereal units. They do have access to a few a few spells, a few single target spells, that sort of stuff, but actually picking down a Lord in the style of this sort of ethereal Lord is actually rather difficult for them. Just because of how much HP they do, and the fact that most of the magic the Lizardmen will bring is anti-large or several targets. So for my lord, I decided to bring Belegar Iron Hammer. You can't really go any other way if you're doing the good old Clan Angrund. He is, of course, a bit of a monster of a hero now. He used to be fairly garbage, but now he does have very significant HP. He has a silver shield, 120 armor. He's an absolute monster of a tank. He has the Mighty Oathstone, which is basically a souped-up stand your ground, especially given that dwarves don't care for leadership anyway, and it provides you with additional expert charge defense, plus 27 melee defense like stand your ground, and its duration is longer at 26 seconds. He also does have Rally, which is of course a short duration 16 leadership buff, not too important for dwarves. I did decide to bring it anyway because I did have a few units that are susceptible to terror, fear, that sort of stuff. Then I did bring, of course, the Hammer of Angrund, which boosts his stats by a huge amount, and it's active as long as leadership is over 50%. And so it's kind of a variant of Frenzy, essentially. And then I did bring Revenge Incarnate, which is a self-cast massive buff for almost a minute to his melee attacks, leadership, and weapon damage. You can actually get his weapon damage, I do believe, to around over 700, actually. So it's pretty crazy what you can get out of good old Belegar. Alongside him, for my two Ghost heroes, unfortunately you can't do a whole 3-man or 4-man Ghost Goon squad. You can only do 2-man. So I did bring on one hand a Thane. The Ghost Ancestors are actually identical to a normal variant of their unit. They're just ethereal, and they cause fear and terror. And they're unbreakable, I guess. Those are their main perks. They don't have any armor, but the Thane does have a silver shield still. He does cause magic damage, which is cool, but not too significant against the lizards. Great melee defense, great melee attack. He does have the Tormentor Sword for that debuff, and he has the AoE Master Rune of Stormy Deadbeat for the buffing to his nearby allies. On the other end, I do have a Runesmith. The Runesmith is coming in with the Hammer of Characteraz, which is a debuff to targeted units. Rune of Negation, Rune of Wrath and Ruin, and actually Rune of Oath and Steel, because Lizardmen, a lot of their infantry does not have armor piercing, and so Rune of Oath and Steel actually functions rather well in this situation because it buffs your troops and just makes them that much tankier. Plus 30 armor is no pushover level. And his stats are okay, and once again, Fear, Terror. Fear and Terror is actually not terrible against Lizardmen. People often forget, I think, that all of their infantry is actually susceptible to Fear and Terror. They're not immune to Psychology, so it's actually not the worst thing to choose. Even Saurus Warriors and Temple Guard can route to that sort of stuff. For my front line, I am running a whole bunch of Longbeards, 4 units of them, backed by 2 units of Dwarf 40s Grey Omen, just to give a little bit of AP punch to the front line. Longbeards, of course, immune to Psychology, which is the key thing here. They also provide encouragement, and so they're really able to just kind of hold their ground against any monstrosity that you get thrown at you. And then alongside them, behind that, I do have Dragonback Slayers, Normal Slayers, and then 3 units of Rangers with Great Weapons. Once again, a bit of a thematic thing here, but Rangers with Great Weapons and Ulthar's Raiders, these guys have a lot of range DPS, and my hope is that if I can catch my opponent by surprise, I can really kind of mow down his large troops, for example, Kroxigors or Krokgar or one of the Bastillodons. If I catch them, I can melt them. Now, the biggest problem with these guys is that their ammo capacity is trash. It's only 8. So these guys, even if they're able to keep firing, they will run out of ammo very quickly. So that DPS goes away rather quick. And then they're not the best of melee troops. They're okay, especially the Ulthar's Raiders, but they're not amazing in close quarters. For my opponent, he did decide to run an entire rather interesting build. Right before we clash here, I'll pause. He decided to run Krokgar, which is the usual. No Hand of Gods, though, by the look of it. But he did bring Swiftness of Eitzel, he did bring Sacred Spawning of Zodal, Cold-Blooded, of course, on every hero, and Deadly Onslaught. Alongside that, 2 Skink Chiefs, which actually caught me by surprise a little bit, because these guys don't have armor piercing, and picking a Dwarf Lord is rather difficult with their firepower. Their firepower is pretty lackluster, they don't do a lot of damage. Interestingly enough, my opponent also took Slippery, which I think is a bit of a waste against dwarves, because they can't really stop you from sniping them, and Slippery's not going to save you, really, from the dwarf infantry, from dwarf anti-aircraft shooting. So just interesting. And they do of course drop rocks on the teardowns, and these guys are mostly there for harassment. I do believe they're fairly cheap, and they can definitely poke away at my heroes and potentially cause damage. So we'll see how they perform. For this front line, my opponent brought a whole bunch of skink cohorts, and skink cohorts are terrible in stat wise. They have only 50 HP per model, so they're very squishy. And they have basically no armor, very bad stats. This I really think that they're not going to hold up very well for the Longbeards, but these guys are there as chaff for the Croxigors who are coming in behind them. And of course, Croxigors have massive melee damage. They have 84 weapon strength, bonus against infantry, armor piercing, melee attack, and melee defense decent. They have 100 armor, which actually makes them rather tanky against a lot of infantry and shooting. And while they do have frenzy, it's actually not the frenzy, the primal instinct. It's not as bad as rampage. So they're fairly controllable. Alongside that, my opponent does have a Bastiladon with a Vivification Crystal for those easy heals. Cold-Blooded does have a debuff effect and doesn't revive lost units. Vivification Crystal does not debuff, and it does provide a full-on heal with and recovers losses. So it's like a single cast and Invocation of the Heck. And then a Bastiladon with the Solar Engine already fired off a few shots, which does debuff and causes magic damage. And I think that perhaps my opponent brought this unit simply to deal with magic heroes, like these guys. Finally, out on the flanks, my opponent does have some skink skirmishers or the chameleon skinks, and the chameleon skinks are actually surprisingly decent against dwarves because they can actually shoot down slayers, they can shoot down rangers, they can deal with the squishy units fairly effectively, and the dwarves can't really catch them. So as we close the gap here, you can see I'm throwing in the Tawny Ironbrow here, the good old Runesmith. We're throwing in our Longbeards. My poor rangers do take a nasty hit here, lose 4 models immediately. And you can see the front line is very quickly going in my favor. Unfortunately, I did accidentally commit the Dragonback Slayers here, which is a major mistake. These guys should really not be in the front line here. Now, I do spot these Croxigors here a bit exposed, and I do start peppering away at them with throwing axes. And my opponent does spot this, and he's just going to barge through the middle here, which is not really defended. Only Belegar's there, and so I'm not really able to do much. I do hit him with a Marked by Ulthar, and I do start melting him down. Their Primal Fury does go off, and I'm sending my normal Slayers in, and the Slayers should absolutely dice these guys up. They do a lot of damage to these sorts of units, and Croxigors don't have the best of melee defense. My Ulthar's Raiders are able to disentangle themselves and start firing away. You can see my opponent's skirmishers shooting at my Slayers. Skirmishers actually have fairly respectable weapon strength and a lot of ammo, so they can definitely do a decent amount of damage over time. It's a similar case with the Skink Chiefs, actually. They have a lot of ammunition. But it's not going to save these Croxigors, who, despite a Revocation Crystal, are getting absolutely annihilated. And now I'm able to shift my fire onto the Bastiladon with the Solar Engine, who is having an absolutely atrocious time of things, getting absolutely shredded. You can see he's already down to about half HP. Those throwing axes do absolutely monstrous amounts of work. And the Bastiladon is collapsing, getting chased by angry Slayers, and the Stunties are really absolutely punish this guy. And my opponent's front line is basically buckling very quickly. The Croxigors are fairly strong, but I did hit him with the Hammer of Karak Draz, which debuffs them. And it really means that I'm going to be able to really shut these guys down and just kind of lay the smack down on them. Fortunately, I'm constantly getting poked away at by these annoying Skink Chiefs who are just sniping away at my Magic Lords. You can see they're getting poked at. And it's doing a bit of damage over time because these guys have no armor, so the fact that they have no armor means that these guys are basically getting full value as long as they can get behind the shield. Fortunately for my opponent, though, Crockguard does get hit by a Tormentor Sword here, just barely clipped, and he's getting tied down and now getting absolutely smushed by a whole bunch of angry throwing axes. Once again, you can see those throwing axes doing absolutely monstrous amounts of work. Unfortunately, these guys haven't fired anything, and they're actually down to already half strength. It's a major problem. And I'm not able to tie down Crockguard, so he's going to be able to just disentangle himself. I'm not quite able to lock him down with the Slayers, and he's just going to run off. And the Slayers are actually over here, doing their own thing. I do accidentally waste some ammo on the Skink Chief, which is a major mistake once again. That's honestly a waste. But I am able to tie down these Croxigors. You can see the Longbeards holding their ground. And my opponent is at this point definitely struggling. He's lost the Solar Engine. It's getting routed off by Slayers. At this point, I could have pulled him back, but I've completely forgot about him, so they keep pursuing. I am hitting these annoying Skink cohorts with a Rune of Wrath and Ruin. Unfortunately, this guy does not have a shield, so he's even more susceptible to that annoying poke damage. You can see he takes about 50 damage a shot, and over time it does add up, and it's definitely a problem. I'm going to throw my, with the buff of the Mighty Oath Stone, we're going to throw my Thane into these Croxigors, hopefully tie him down a little bit, and lay the smackdown on him. In the meantime, over here in the heart of things, my Dwarf Infantry has devolved into a blob. You can see my Rangers with great weapons are just throwing themselves into the fray. They'll actually do okay against the Croxigors, because Croxigors have bad melee stats, and these guys do have armor piercing, so they'll actually tear through them fairly well even in close quarters, as long as they're not getting smacked down. Over here you can see Crockguard has actually been healed up by a massive amount. He's healed up by about over 1500 HP actually by those Revocation Crystals, probably cold-blooded and all that sort of stuff. So I'm trying to whittle him down with the Rangers. Good old Belegar slugging out with some skink cohorts. You can see my poor lords have been getting sniped down. My runesmith is now in a really, really rough spot at 367 HP, and you can see my rangers are getting absolutely annihilated by these annoying poison spewing skinks. And these guys still have a decent amount of ammo. They're not going to be able to do very much to my infantry, but they can obviously really mess up my shooting. I do, however, hit this guy with a marked by Ulthar, in spite of the fact that the unit, wherever the Ulthar's rangers are, these guys actually no longer the Ulthar's rangers actually no longer have ammo, but they can still use marked by Ulthar, so that debuffs this guy, debuffs Krokgar, and now they're able to kind of gap close and really get on top of him and start dishing out the hurt to poor Krokgar. And he's having a really bad time with this. He's getting surrounded, he's getting beaten down. And my opponent's really running out of troops. You can see the Dragonback Slayers, and now actually the normal Slayers are surrounding and beating down the Bastillodon with the Purification Crystal. It has absolutely terrible stats, so it's actually going to get shredded fairly quickly. And with the Slayers there, I actually don't have to worry too much about, say, Kroxigors when I run out of ammo, because it's not really, I don't say it's basically not relevant, actually, because these guys are still susceptible to Slayers, and they can charge in all they want, but the Slayers will tear them up. Unfortunately, I'm really losing my sort of casters. My runesmith finally does go down over here. You can see the ghost actually does have a corpse, which is kind of silly. You think he just dissipates into the mist, but he doesn't. That is what it is. Over here, Longbeards are slugging it out. You can see I do commit some the Dragonback Slayers to chase after the Bastillodon with the Purification Crystal, and they're definitely trying to do their best, but pursuing it, those aren't the best at pursuing much of anything. Krokgar is getting slaughtered, but he does get another cold-blooded off on him, but that is, of course, going to debuff his stats a bit. And he's able to disengage once again, but he's broken, he's taking a lot of hurt, and if he tries to come back, he will not have a Bastillodon to heal him this time around. These rangers have come back, but they're really beat up. These rangers with the ammo, unfortunately, are also routed off. But at this point, my opponent is running out of ammo on his Chameleon Skinks as well. And while they can definitely pick off the Ulthar's Raiders, and perhaps even pick off my hero here, they will not be able to pick off Belegar. Belegar's got way too much armor. And they really won't be able to save all these Skinks who are going to get massacred by my infantry. It's definitely one of the problems for my opponent. His armor-piercing supply was rather limited. He only really had the Kroxigors and the Bastillodons, and then Krokgar. And about half of his army was non-armor piercing units, the Zeus King Chiefs, these guys, and so they're really not able to do very much. So my opponent's Krokgar is just kind of sitting around here, he's shaken, but trying to heal up a little bit. My opponent still might have a cold-blooded on some of his troops. You can see the poor Dwarf Lord in spite of his silver shield, is getting annihilated, and there's really nothing much I can do. I do pop Rally, which is pointless. I'm actually not entirely sure why I did that. And I was just kind of popping abilities, trying to save this guy, but there was really nothing that could be done there. And you can see the Chameleon Skinks, despite the ammo count seeming really low, these guys are actually at 2 ammo. And they're not going to be able to do very much. They're going to poison Belegar, which is annoying, but not the end of the world, and they'll soon run out of ammo. Even the King Chiefs are starting to run low. They definitely don't have enough ammo to kill off Belegar. But the problem is that Krokgar is coming back, and Krokgar can, of course, knock poor Belegar around, and Belegar is very, very far away from home. The rest of my army is trying to get these Skin Codes because these are the only units I can actually get at with the dwarfs. Everything else here is too fast, and the Slayers are still over here chasing out the Bastillodon with the Purification Crystal. You can see Belegar has taken some damage, and I actually try to brace, and I think the brace actually does work, but I do get sent flying, and I'm still getting peppered down by a whole bunch of angry Skinks. But now the Slayers are coming back, the courageous Slayers, and kind of just in time. The Chameleon Skinks are basically out of ammo. And once they're out of ammo, they're going to be in a rough spot. Belegar does try to stand his ground here. He pops Mighty Oath, so he pops Rally, which will help him. And the Slayers are jumping into the fray. And while he might be able to disrupt my Slayers and knock him back, the Slayers will dice through the Skinks, Chameleon Skinks, very, very quickly. In spite of their poison and all that sort of stuff, you can see they're getting absolutely annihilated here. And Krokgar does disengage, and he now is going to cycle charge into the fray, trying to get at Belegar, just whittle Belegar down. You can see he actually does manage to really buckle Belegar there and terrify him, which is a really problem, because Belegar, of course, he's susceptible to psychology. In spite of the fact that he's Revenge Incarnate, Mr. Revenge Incarnate is susceptible to psych. In the meantime, my Slayers are still chasing off this Bastillodon because I do not want it to come back. The Purification Crystal at this stage of the game could be absolutely critical at bringing my opponent back into the things, and I don't want to allow that to happen. So now I'm bringing these Slayers back, and we are really slaughtering these Chameleon Skinks in the pits here. And now my opponent's army is going to simply shatter and rout. Krokgar is really beat up. You can see Belegar still around 1,000 HP, and we do get a Pyrrhic victory. So definitely I think one of my opponent's problems there was that he really had no armor piercing in his front line. His front line of Skinks practically raked in about 20 kills, a little over 20 kills in between all 6 units. And while these are very cheap troops, it's still a somewhat significant investment. It's almost 2,000. It's probably about 2,000. Even though these guys did have better, these guys did have chevrons put on them, and these chevrons were not gained in battle. These guys came in with this was about 2,000 points worth of troops. Backed up by Chameleon Skinks, and the Chameleon Skinks racked up a lot of kills, most likely against the Rangers, but way too late to deal with the Rangers. The problem was that the Chameleon Skinks were shooting at other units. At first they were poking at my Dwarf Warriors and that sort of stuff, and by the time they focused on the Rangers were basically out of ammo, which is really too little too late. And the Chameleon Skinks were another 1,200, so really my opponents invested about 4,000, or sorry, about 3,000 points in just these units. And then the Skink Chiefs themselves are another probably about 1,500, maybe even 2,000 gold. So really there was a lot of non-armor piercing in this army against an army that's pretty tanky, especially the Longbeards and the Dwarf Warriors. Now of course it did work rather well at sniping down my magic or my ethereal heroes, and I was actually kind of shocked by that. I was definitely caught by surprise. I had a lot of fun using them regardless. I thought it was pretty fun. It's always interesting to run the ancestors as Angrund. Slayers did absolute work. This was kind of almost an ideal situation for him, fighting a whole bunch of squishies and then monsters. If my opponent had some Stars Warriors or the Temple Guard, this could have gone much differently, but I think that the Slayers really had a bit of an ideal time. You see these guys gained 2 chevrons. And even the Dragonback Slayers had an okay time of it, and they spent most of the end game chasing after one of the Bastillodons. Honestly, the MVPs in this game, I would say, were actually the Rangers Grey Weapons. Even though it doesn't look like it based on their kill count, these guys actually completely annihilated a unit of Croc Scourge, or came very close. They annihilated the Bastillodon with the Solar Engine, and they practically annihilated Croc Gar, which were in themselves very significant units, and units that really needed to go. Rangers Grey Weapons have huge burst potential, and that's one of the really core reasons to bring them, especially with Ulthar's Raiders. The biggest problem is their low ammo capacity at only 8, but nonetheless, the damage output was huge. It really melted down Croc Gar, and really kind of set me up for a nice win, I think, in the long run. When they melted down Croc Gar initially, they melted down the Bastillodon, they melted down those Croc Scourge. And that was just a huge contribution from these guys. Yes, they ran out of ammo, and then once they ran out of ammo, they were basically useless. But for a little over 2,000 gold on these guys, it was exactly 2050. They performed pretty well. They did a huge amount of work. Just the Bastillodon with the Solar Engine alone is, I do believe, 1,100 gold off the field. The Croc Scourge are another over 2,000. And honestly, the damage they did to Croc Gar was probably worth another 3,000. They forced out probably worth another 1,000, 1,500, something like that. They forced out a lot of cold-blooded. They forced out a Revivification Crystal. The Revivification Crystal has a cooldown, and a fairly long one at that, if I remember correctly. So it was just, all in all, these guys just did really well. But yeah, good game to my opponent. I do hope you guys enjoyed the game. I definitely, you can see the Longbeards just did great. If you liked the video, if you like this sort of content, I do hope you guys will hit subscribe and like down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions about the game or anything like that, be sure to post it down in the comments. And I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.